During the break in the music, Tom heard a beautiful young woman, standing right in front of him, address her friend. "How can I get rid of him, Claire? I don't want to be rude, but I really don't like him." "Well, he went to buy us drinks, Isabella," her friend replied. "We can just leave without saying anything." "I can't treat him like that," the beautiful blonde with long legs said to her friend. "He's not terrible or annoying, he just doesn't appeal to me." Tom looked at the girl and glanced twice at the slender legs peeking out from under the hem of her miniskirt. Perhaps he could help a girl in such high heels. "Hello, ladies," he said, leaning towards them. "May I offer my services?" The women stared at him in confusion. The blonde girl protested, "I don't have a boyfriend. And anyway, what's it to you?" At that moment, their acquaintance approached with a tray of drinks. Tom quickly caught on. "Ah, these are for my sister and her friend?" "Thanks, buddy," he said, taking the beer from the guy. "For your sister?" the guy asked, puzzled. "Yes, I came to take her home," Tom replied with a smile. "You promised Mom you'd be back early," he winked at the blonde. Unexpectedly, the second girl, Claire, asked to join them. Tom readily agreed, surprising himself by remembering her name. As they were leaving, Tom felt a pang of conscience and decided to make amends with the unlucky guy. "Do you see that redhead at the bar? Buy her a vodka tonic and tell her you're Tom's friend. She won't refuse," he winked, slipping a bill into the bewildered guy's hand. Once outside, Claire laughed, "You're quite cheeky. You stole beer from the poor guy." "Nonsense. I bought him a drink and introduced him to Lily," Tom shrugged. When they approached Tom's luxurious Jaguar, the girl's eyes widened in amazement. "Well, shall we go home or have another drink?" Tom asked with a smile. "Let's have a drink, Tom. Definitely let's have a drink," Isabella purred, speaking for the first time. Claire glanced at the car, then at Tom, and nodded in agreement. The trio cheerfully set off to continue the evening. The evening continued pleasantly, and all three had a good time. The girls discovered that Tom couldn't dance at all, but he turned out to be an interesting conversationalist. Tom, in turn, learned that they were not only pretty but also intelligent. He was surprised to find out that at some point Isabella became religious and went abroad as a volunteer after university. She didn't go into details, but Tom learned that she had become disillusioned with her life in her church and had only recently returned to the UK. This didn't bother Tom, as he had never been particularly interested in religion. Several very pleasant hours had passed, and they decided to end the evening. Tom pondered on how the situation would unfold further. Both girls were very attractive, and he didn't really think about whom to stay with. "Tom, could you give me a ride first?" unexpectedly asked Claire, anticipating his offer. "It's on the way to Isabella's house." It seemed like everything was settled. They arrived at Claire's house, and Tom, portraying a gallant gentleman, jumped out of the car to open the door for her. He escorted her to the entrance and was about to bid farewell, almost shaking her hand. "Thank you for tonight and everything else," Tom smiled Claire and kissed him. "What's going on, Claire?" asked Tom, enjoying but puzzled by her unexpected behavior. "Why did you ask for a ride first, and now you're kissing me?" "I'm glad you asked, Tom," she sadly replied. "Last time you came to the bar, we flipped a coin, and Isabella won." "Be careful with her, Tom. She leads a rather secluded life and isn't very experienced. If things don't work out between you, don't forget about me." With a final smile, Claire stuck out her tongue, playfully winked, and disappeared behind the entrance door. "Let's see," thought Tom. "Let's see how the rest of the evening goes." He returned to L. Jumping back into his Jaguar, Tom started the engine and swiftly raced down the road, skillfully shifting gears and maneuvering through the traffic, imagining himself as Sterling Moss or Jensen Button. After 15 minutes, he was already parking near her house, climbing the stairs, entering the apartment, and sitting on the couch with a glass in hand. "So, you don't have a steady boyfriend now?" Tom asked, confident that he was on safe ground. "I haven't had a boyfriend in a very long time," she replied thoughtfully. "I had a couple of very superficial relationships in university, and then I went to Africa." "And what went wrong?" Tom inquired. "I don't want to talk about it, Isabella sharply replied. But later she hinted that those who set the rules did not always know how to follow them in their personal lives. I hope you don't think you'll end up in my bed tonight, Tom, Isabella continued with a smile. I wasn't thinking about that, Tom replied, feigning offended innocence. But since you brought it up, he didn't finish the sentence, and Isabella told him he didn't stand a chance. Half an hour later, Tom was already in her bed. Yes, it would be nice to hear that events unfolded exactly like that, but no. Not on the next night, nor the third. However, to shorten the long story, Isabella agreed to marry him in about 10 months, by which time they were already living together. Claire was to be the bridesmaid of honor, and Tom's friend Alf was to be the best man, as he could tell jokes better than any of Tom's other close friends. Isabella's parents were thrilled that their eldest daughter had finally found a man, and such a man who had already made his mark in the world. Tom's parents instantly fell in love with their future daughter-in-law. Tom understood that this time everything was different from his first marriage. He and Isabella had many shared interests, and they had already successfully tried out many of them together. Neither Tom nor Isabella were religious, but Isabella's idea of getting married in a church to uphold traditions did not evoke strong objections from Tom. He simply wanted to be with this woman. On the eve of the wedding, following tradition, Isabella packed a bag and went to stay overnight at her friend Claire's. Behave yourself, darling, Tom joked, knowing that she had a modest bachelorette party planned for the evening. And what do you think, old fool, that I could do? Teased his bride. We're just going to a regular pub, not a strip club. By the way, I actually met you at the pub and picked you up, Tom chuckled, handing her the jacket. There are plenty of guys there who wouldn't mind chatting with a beauty like you. He expected Isabella to laugh in response, but instead she said in a strange tone, well, that won't happen anymore, right, Tom? No more guys flirting with me. Do you want other men to talk to you, Isabella? Tom asked cautiously, not quite understanding where the conversation was going. No, of course not, Tom, Isabella immediately replied. I'm just silly, Tom, pay no attention. Are you sure you want to marry me, Isabella? Tom demanded, grabbing her hand and pulling her closer. You haven't changed your mind? Of course not, darling, she smiled, reaching out to kiss him. I'm just carried away by emotions and behaving foolishly. With these words, Isabella chuckled lightly, picked up her bag, and headed towards the door. See you tomorrow at the church, Tom, she tossed over her shoulder. I love you. Calming down, Tom went to the pub to have a final pint of beer with his friends. The evening passed pleasantly, mainly discussing Arsenal's recent brilliant victory over Chelsea. Returning home late at night, Tom had already forgotten about the small disagreement with Isabella and was looking forward to a cup of tea in bed. But he was greeted by a ringing phone. Tom Stevenson speaking. Thank goodness, you're finally home, Claire greeted him. This is the third time I've called. What happened, Claire? Tom asked anxiously. Is everything okay with Isabella? She's fine, Tom, but you'd better come here as soon as possible. Why? What happened? Tom exclaimed in distress. Was there an accident? No, not an accident, Claire replied. But you need to come and sort things out with Isabella if you still want to get married in the morning. Tom felt everything inside him tighten. Sort things out with Isabella? What the hell happened at her bachelorette party? His thoughts naturally turned to the most obvious. What did she do and with whom? But Claire didn't delve into details and insisted that he come to her immediately. Tom raced down the road to Claire's small apartment, his thoughts racing ahead. What happened? Where is Isabella? Is she okay? Questions swirled in his mind. When Claire opened the door, Tom bombarded her with a hail of questions. She silently handed him a cup of tea, and he finally fell silent. Everything is fine with her, Tom, I promise, Claire said. She's in my bedroom, crying. Oh God, no, Tom muttered, imagining the worst. Tell me honestly, Claire, I beg you. How bad is it? What did Isabella do? It's not about what she did, Tom, Claire answered quietly. It's about what she didn't do. Seeing Tom's puzzled look, Claire slowly began to explain. Ever since we arrived, guys in the pub have been hitting on us constantly. 8 well-dressed girls, They probably thought we were all drunk. So what did Isabella do? Demanded Tom. Please, just tell me, I'm sure I can forgive her. It's not about her, Tom, Claire continued. It was all of us. Well, except for June and Tina. June and Tina? Repeated a bewildered Tom. Why were they different? They are married and do not flirt with others. Tom stared blankly at her. It made no sense. Tom, Claire said loudly, as if he were deaf. We all flirted with those guys, had fun, danced, and kissed endlessly. And Isabella? No, Isabella just sat there and refused offers to dance and everything else. I still don't understand, Tom weakly protested. You men are so foolish, Claire continued. Can't you see? We all had a great time, flirting and chatting. I even let one guy touch me on the dance floor right in front of everyone, just for fun. And those two sluts, Marcy and Judy, left with a couple of them to the parking lot. I'm sorry, Claire, but I still don't understand. She missed out on all the fun, Tom, Claire frowned. Don't you see? You are actually the first real man she's dating. And suddenly it occurred to her that she will never know what it's like to cheat. Tom felt nauseous, realizing that Claire's words could be true. They talked a little more. Claire detailed what happened and what Isabella said. Finally, Tom cautiously opened the bedroom door and nervously peeked inside. Are you okay, Isabella? He timidly asked, looking at the messy heap on the bed. What are you doing here, Tom? She sobbed in response. Please, leave. I won't leave until we sort this out, my dear, he insisted. There's nothing to sort out, Tom, she murmured. I can't go through this. I'm so sorry. Maybe we should talk about it, darling? There's nothing to talk about, Tom, she replied. I just can't go through this. Tom sat on the bed and stroked her hair for a while. He admitted to himself that the thought had crossed his mind to simply get up and walk away from this problem. But then a completely different thought came to him. It was at that moment, as it seems to him, that he truly realized how much Isabella meant to him. How deeply he had fallen in love with her and how much he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. He pleaded with her for about 10 minutes when she suddenly sat up abruptly and hugged him, saying how much she loved him. So what's the problem, darling? He demanded an answer. We love each other, so let's get married. But what? He laughed, trying to lighten the mood. You're the only man I've been with, Tom, Isabella sobbed sadly. What if, well, you know. Are you saying you want to sleep with someone else, Isabella? Tom asked, not knowing what to say, not understanding what she's thinking. Tom and Isabella were sitting in a bar after a few rounds of beer. The atmosphere was tense, and Isabella nervously smiled. Tom, what if one day I want to know what it's like to be with another man? She quietly asked. Tom gently kissed her on the cheek. Is that your only concern, darling? No, not the only one, sighed Isabella. Unexpectedly for himself, Tom blurted out, you know what? I'll give you a get-out-of-jail-free card as a wedding gift. One time with another guy, and I'll forgive you. Isabella looked at him in horror. You can't be serious. But I want this, my love, Tom continued, possibly getting too carried away with the theatricality of the moment. Just once, and I promise to forgive you. Tom, Isabella began, but he interrupted her, pulling her closer. I will love you for a lifetime, and you will be so happy in bed that you will never want another, he whispered. The next day, they got married as planned. Years passed, and their marriage was happy, 2 beautiful children, love, and understanding. Sometimes they jokingly recalled Tom's promise, but with time, that topic faded away. But 10 years later, Isabella unexpectedly returned to that conversation. Tom sat behind the bar counter, watching the dancing couples. His wife Isabella had been dancing with the same man for half an hour, which was completely unlike her. Usually, she would return after 2 or 3 dances. Something is not right here. Tom felt a growing sense of unease in his stomach. When the music stopped, he expected Isabella to return, but it didn't happen. The unease turned into a heavy knot in his chest. For the first time in their 10 years of marriage, Tom felt a pang of jealousy. Isabella was a charming, slightly plump woman, not a beauty, but with stunning long slender legs. Even at 39, she could afford short skirts. And that man was a complete opposite of Tom, tall, slender, and blonde. What on earth did she see in him? Tom wondered, finally deciding to take action. He stood up and, muttering something about the restroom, set off to find his wife. Discovering the couple in the corner of the dance floor, Tom froze in place. Isabella was pressed against the blonde man, resting her head on his chest. They weren't even dancing, just standing in an embrace. Damn it! Tom cursed to himself, feeling his breath quicken and the signal sirens blaring in his head. He heard Isabella chuckle in response to her partner's words and stroke his cheek. It was too much already. "Hello, Isabella," Tom deliberately cheerfully pronounced, approaching them. "I lost you. Where have you been disappearing to?" Isabella seemed to snap out of it and guiltily moved away from her partner. "What?" she asked, bewildered, looking at him with an incomprehensible gaze. "You were gone for almost an hour," Tom said, barely containing his anger. "What have you been up to here?" "Oh, Tom," she sighed. "This is Dave. We were just dancing and chatting, that's all." "Too long, Isabella," Tom insisted, reaching out his hand. "Let's go from here." For a moment, he thought she would refuse, and he wasn't sure what he would do in that case. Perhaps he would hit someone. "Yes, Tom, of course," Isabella murmured after some hesitation, gently reaching out her hand. "May I finish the last dance, darling?" "The music has already ended, Isabella," he explained the obvious briefly. "It stopped several minutes ago." "Oh yes, of course, Tom," she mumbled confusedly. "I'll just say goodbye to Dave now, dear." "No farewells, Isabella," Tom insisted irritably. "We are leaving from here right now." "Wait a moment, buddy," her new friend Dave began to intervene, but one look from Tom made him wisely change his mind. "Now, Isabella," Tom repeated. "Now, or I will leave without you." "All right, Tom," Isabella echoed reluctantly, releasing Dave's hands. "We'll meet again somehow, Dave." Tom was furious. He practically dragged his wife back to the bar. "What the hell are you doing, Isabella?" he almost shouted. "Who is this damn guy? What were you doing with him?" "Nothing," Tom defended Isabella. "Absolutely nothing, just the dance made me ponder, that's all." "Ponder?" "I think it was something more than just reflections." Isabella looked intently at him, and Tom realized that usually Isabella looked him in the eyes. But not this evening. "We need to talk, Tom," she finally said softly. "Let's go home, and we can talk." "Not at home, Isabella," Tom exploded, unexpectedly horrifying himself with these words. "If we need to talk, there is no better time than now." "Better at home, when we are alone, darling," she insisted. But Tom refused, demanding that she reveal everything now, on the verge of breaking down. "Fine," she agreed. "But listen to me till the end." Tom agreed, still horrified by what she was about to tell him, but he agreed nonetheless. He was completely bewildered and wondered if in the next few moments a death sentence to what he considered their perfect marriage would be pronounced. "This is not a sudden decision, dear," Isabella began. "I have been contemplating this for a month or more, but the time has come, and I have decided to make use of the promise you gave me." "A promise? What the hell promise?" exclaimed Tom. "I never promised you that you could continue like this with another man." "On the night before our wedding," Isabella reminded, "you made me a promise, and the time has come, my dear." "What promise?" mumbled Tom, suddenly feeling a void inside. "I don't remember any promise." But he lied. God, how he lied. He did give her a promise, as she said, although he had long discarded it from his mind. "I believe you remember, Tom," Isabella said softly, avoiding his gaze. "I'm sorry, my dear, and I don't want to cause you pain. I'm turning 40 soon, and no matter how much I love you, I think it's time. We need to talk, Tom," she whispered, leading him away from the dance floor. "This desire has been building up inside me for years, and it won't go away." In amazement, Tom allowed himself to be taken home. "Everything will be fine, dear," Isabella softly said. "We will figure everything out." At home, Tom couldn't contain his emotions. "Damn it, stop apologizing." "Forgive me, I can't help it," Isabella replied anxiously. To hell with everything. I'm going to bed. Do as you please. Tom shouted, losing his composure. He realized he was simply delaying the inevitable moment of truth. Despite Isabella's innocence, which had once attracted him, he knew she had a strong enough character not to back down. Tom stood on the brink of a family crisis. His wife Isabella had just informed him of her intention to cheat, and he felt his world crumbling. Years of shared life, raising children in an atmosphere of trust and respect, all of that now seemed to be under threat. On Sunday morning, Tom came down for breakfast after a sleepless night. Isabella had prepared a full English breakfast, a sure sign that the conversation the day before had been carefully planned. "Where are the kids?" Tom asked, noticing the unusual silence in the house. "They went out with Ted and Andrea for the whole day," Isabella replied, avoiding his gaze. "They'll only be back in the evening." Tom looked intently at his wife. "You planned all of this, didn't you?" "Yes," she quietly admitted. "Forgive me, Tom. I didn't want to. Oh God, I feel so guilty." "Isabella, I understand that you regret it, but what should we do now?" Tom asked bitterly. "I haven't changed my mind, Tom," Isabella said firmly. "I have to do this. But I love you very much and want to do everything possible to make it easier for you." "And how the hell do you plan to make it easier for me when my wife will be entertaining herself with another man?" Tom exclaimed. "What are you suggesting? Allow me to watch?" To his surprise, Isabella replied, "If you want, Tom. I know some men like that." "What?" Tom raised his voice. "Isabella, I don't want you to make love with someone else, and certainly don't want to watch that." "I just thought that you might want to," she said uncertainly. "No, Isabella. The mere thought of it makes me sick," Tom almost shouted. They silently looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. Finally, Tom broke the silence. "Maybe you should just do it without telling me. At least then I wouldn't be tormented." "I couldn't deceive you like that, Tom," Isabella took his hand. "Please, if you love me, don't make me do this behind your back." "I'm not forcing you to do anything, Isabella," Tom bitterly remarked. "It's you who's making me suffer." Tom felt he had reached his limit. The woman he loved was about to cuckold him, and he knew it wouldn't be easy to persuade her otherwise. Crazy thoughts raced through his mind on how to stop her, but he realized it was futile. "Give me a few days to think, please," Tom gloomily requested. "All right, dear," Isabella replied with tears in her eyes. "But don't delay too long." For a whole week, Tom tried to ignore the problem, hoping it would disappear on its own. Isabella behaved cautiously around him, carefully choosing her words. One morning during breakfast, Isabella mumbled, "I was talking to a guy." "With whom?" Tom nervously asked, hoping for the best. "With another man, Tom," Isabella replied with a trembling voice. "I called Dave. Do you remember that guy the first danced with?" Tom was shocked. "Just not Dave, please, Isabella," he insisted. "Anyone else, but not him." "Why not him?" Isabella asked quietly. "He's quite handsome, and I liked him." "I didn't like him at all," grumbled Tom, unable to find another reason. "It's not necessary for you to like him, Tom," Isabella replied more energetically. "You don't even have to meet him. Why not just agree and end this, darling?" Tom couldn't bear the thought of another man being with his wife. They continued to argue, and their relationship began to crumble. A few days later, Isabella asked to talk. "That promise you gave me many years ago, Tom," Isabella began confidently. "When you gave it to me that night, I understood that you truly meant it." Isabella paused and looked at Tom with tears, waiting for his reaction. Tom could only shrug, feeling everything knotting up inside. "I really believed in what you promised me, Tom," Isabella continued. "That if the time came, you would allow me a little intrigue with another man. It relieved me of all my worries, and perhaps for the first time, I realized that you truly love me as much as I love you. You had to do it to make such a promise. And then came the moment when everything went downhill. Now you're saying you didn't mean that, Tom?" Isabella asked, disappointment and pain evident in her voice. Tom and Isabella sat across from each other, their faces wet with tears. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife and serve it on a platter at a wake. Do you mean to tell me that you lied to me to convince me to marry you? That our whole marriage is built on lies? Isabella's voice trembled with hurt and anger. Tom tried to justify himself. I didn't lie, Isabella. I didn't know myself what I was thinking at that moment. I truly meant it, but I never imagined you would ask about it. Well, that moment has come, Tom, Isabella slowly uttered. I'm sorry, dear, but I simply must find out what it's like to be with another man. While I'm still young and attractive. Tom felt anger rising within him. And what suddenly attracted you to other men? Why now, after all these years? It's not that sudden, dear, Isabella replied, wiping away a tear. For years, I've listened to other girls at work talking about the men they've been with. Some married women had been with several different men, some even after getting married. And you approve of that? Tom exclaimed in dismay. Of course not, Isabella countered. They did it behind their husbands' backs. That's betrayal. Besides, they didn't have the same promise as I do. What about if I went to another woman? Tom tried to reach his wife. How would you feel? Would you tolerate that? No, Tom, I wouldn't tolerate it, Isabella flared up. That would be betrayal. I would never stand for it. If you cheated on me, I would leave you. But you yourself want to cheat on me. Tom shouted. How the hell do you think I want some other guy to entertain you? It's not the same thing, Tom, Isabella replied no less fiercely. Why can't you understand that? Why are you so stubborn? They yelled at each other for a few more minutes. In a fit of rage, Tom threw the table lamp across the room. Isabella, in tears, ran to her room, calling her husband a liar. 20 minutes later, Tom heard the front door slam. He was in the kitchen, trying to salvage the burnt casserole, and realized that he wouldn't get any help from Isabella today. That's it, he thought. If she comes back with some guy, it's over between us. I'll demand a divorce. An hour later, the phone rang. Tom hesitated to pick up, convinced that Isabella was teasing him, having picked up some guy. But the call didn't stop, and he finally answered. Hello, he sharply threw into the receiver. Tom, this is Claire, the voice of Isabella's best friend sounded. Yes, Claire, how can I help? Tom dryly replied. Isabella is not here. I know, Tom, Claire said. She's at my place and in a terrible state. It's her fault, not mine, Tom snapped. Perhaps, Claire continued. But I thought it best to inform you that she's here, not somewhere else. Tom murmured words of gratitude, feeling the tension and anger leaving his weary body. He thanked Christ, whom, by the way, he still did not believe in, that Isabella had not done anything foolish. She told me what's going on, Tom, Claire continued after a pause. It must be terribly hard for you. That's right, Claire, Tom almost cried over the phone. Could you try to reason with her, please? I can talk to her, Tom, Claire replied. But I understand her point of view, just as you do. Her point of view? She wants to go and cheat on me, Claire. How can you understand her point of view? How can anyone at all? She sees it differently, Tom, Claire said calmly. She sincerely believes that your promise was sincere, and she doesn't understand why you consider her behavior unreasonable. What do you think, Claire? This was the only possible question for Tom. Do you think she is acting wisely? Well, both yes and no, Tom, replied Claire after a pause. Did Isabella really tell you what I said to her the night before our wedding? Tom asked, not believing his ears. Yes, Tom, answered Claire. She was so happy about it. Isabella has often talked about it since then. Tom shook his head. Oh my, no. We joked about it in the early days, but then this topic wasn't brought up for years. Until Isabella touched on it recently. Claire looked at him sympathetically. Dear Tom, Isabella has often talked to me about this over the years, especially in the last year. I thought she was preparing, but I had no idea that you were unaware. What should I do now, Claire? Tom implored. If she goes through with it, I don't think I can bear it. You know what she's like, Tom, Claire reminded. With her religious upbringing, Isabella has very firm, unwavering beliefs. For her, a solemn promise must be kept. Tom exclaimed in despair, so, my marriage is over, no matter what I do. I am completely at a loss. Claire suggested turning to a family counselor, but Tom doubted he would be able to find one before Isabella left. In the end, they agreed that Isabella would stay overnight at Claire's, and the next day all three would meet for a war council. When Isabella and Claire opened the door the next day, the atmosphere in the house was tense. Tom and Isabella awkwardly greeted each other, unsure whether to embrace. "Stop arguing," commanded Claire, taking the situation into her own hands. She seated them in different corners and briefly outlined the situation as she saw it. Isabella explained that she took Tom's promise seriously. Considering he was practically the only man who had ever kissed her, he should understand how important it was to her. "In the end, it's just a fling," she concluded. "Just to see what it's like with another man. It won't affect my feelings for my husband in any way." Tom sighed deeply, trying to remain calm. "I admit I made a promise, but I never believed it would actually happen." "But that's not the point. The thought of another man making love to my wife makes me sick. If you want to know, I've changed my mind, and I won't stand aside and accept what you want to do." Tom fell silent, but then said something foolish, immediately regretting not confessing his feelings to Isabella. "You are simply obsessed," Isabella retorted. "You can't bear the thought of another man using your precious property." "This is unfair," Claire intervened before Tom could respond. "I think you should apologize to Tom." "He doesn't want me to apologize. He told me so himself," parried Isabella. The situation spiraled out of control again when Tom couldn't hold back and called Isabella a stupid cow for her foolish remark. "Both of you, be quiet," Claire shouted at them. "If you continue in the same spirit, you'd better get a divorce." "Divorce? Separation?" Isabella sobbed, jumping to her feet. "I don't want a divorce. I love Tom and don't want to leave him." "Then sit down and be quiet, Isabella," Claire said sternly. "Otherwise, that's exactly how it will all end." After calming down a bit, Claire continued, "Tom, is there a way for you to agree to this? At least once?" "I can't imagine even once, Claire," Tom replied. "How do I know if once will be enough for her?" "That's a good question, Tom," Claire agreed. "Isabella, have you thought about this?" "Not really," Isabella mumbled in response. "But it would just be for fun and only once, as he promised me." "What if you develop feelings for another man, Isabella?" Claire continued. "But that won't happen, Claire. It will be just once and only for amusement." "No romantic dinner with candles, Isabella," Claire insisted. "No hand-in-hand walks, kisses, and all that?" Isabella lowered her face into her hands and pondered for a moment before replying, "Well, yes, I suppose I was expecting a bit of romance. It wouldn't be very pleasant without it. So it's a quick dinner, some groping in the parking lot, and then off to his place in bed?" Tom sarcastically interjected, plunging the knife even deeper. "No, no," sobbed Isabella. "Not at all. I want a man to charm me and not rush with seduction." "You've read too many damn magazine articles," Tom snapped. "That's unfair, Tom," Claire interrupted him. "Women don't think like men. If Isabella is going to do this only once, it's her only chance, and she wants it to be like a fairy tale." "And then go back to the boring old me, is that what you mean?" Tom snapped angrily, and they all sat there, looking at each other. "And continue our boring old life as before. Is that your main problem, Tom?" Claire asked thoughtfully. "That Isabella will compare you to someone else? That she might accidentally find someone better than you in bed?" With a heavy heart, Tom realized that Claire had caught the main problem. "Not the only one, of course, but a very big one. Huge for any man. It came to me," Tom whispered, confessing. "How would you feel, Isabella?" Claire addressed his wife. "If you experienced sensations you've never felt before, could you forget him? Could you go back and be as happy with Tom as before?" This shook Tom to the core. But before he could say anything, a real hell broke loose. "Now you both are attacking me," Isabella squealed, jumping to her feet. "None of you understand what I've been through. None of you understand how much I need to know what another man is like." "I thought you would understand me, Claire. I thought you were my friend." "I am your friend, Isabella," Claire protested. "I'm just trying." Before she could finish her sentence, Isabella shouted at her, "Shut up, both of you!" Tom exclaimed, jumping to his feet. "Enough of this nonsense." Both women fell silent and stared at him with open mouths. Neither of them had ever seen him react so angrily in all the time they had known him. "I have made a decision," Tom said, his voice returning to a reasonable level. "I won't back down," Isabella snarled. "You promised." "Yes, I promised," Tom confirmed, looking her straight in the eyes. Tom shifted his gaze from Isabella to Claire. The atmosphere in the room was becoming increasingly tense. "We have always taught our children to keep promises," Tom slowly uttered. "So if this is so important to you, Isabella, I will keep mine." A deafening silence fell. Both women stared at him in disbelief, barely trusting their ears. "Damn," Claire muttered almost inaudibly. "Are you serious, dear?" Isabella cautiously asked. "Do you really mean it?" "Yes, Isabella, I mean it," Tom replied with much more confidence than he actually felt. "If you want to have fun with another man, go ahead. Enjoy yourself. Have a blast. And you don't mind?" Isabella asked in confusion. "Of course he minds, damn it." Claire intervened, not letting Tom respond. "He hates the very idea itself. Stop tormenting him." "But will you allow me to do this?" Isabella sought confirmation from her husband. "Yes, I said I will allow," Tom replied. "And you will forgive me after this, my dear? Wasn't it me who promised you this?" "But why?" she asked. "Why did you suddenly change your mind?" "Because I suddenly remembered how much I love you, Isabella." This slightly cheered her up. "Do you truly love me enough to let me have fun with another man and forgive me, my dear?" Isabella shuddered, a new tear rolling down her cheek. "And will you still love me after this?" "I promise to forgive you, Isabella," Tom replied, carefully choosing his words. "Whether I will still love you after this, only time will tell." "I don't understand, Tom." "I promised to forgive you all these years, Isabella," he reminded her. "But I didn't promise and couldn't promise to continue loving you. It's simply impossible to promise something like that. Where the hell would I know what I'll feel when you come back to me after sleeping with some other guy?" "And that's it?" Tom realized he had played his trump card and saw where this would end. But Isabella was not aware of it yet. "I'll do it quickly, Tom. I promise you, dear," she said softly. "Just once, I promise." "Don't rush, Isabella," Tom calmly replied. "Take your time. Maybe you'll find that guy, Dave, you liked if you want. Start a real romance. Spend as much time as you want and get it all out of your head." "Does this suit you?" Isabella asked, her face contorted in an unfamiliar grimace. "I didn't say I didn't care. I simply said I would forgive you, but don't you dare tell me about it. About who it is, where you meet, how much fun you have. I don't want to know anything about it, ever. Just tell me when it's all over, no matter how long it takes, and we'll see what we'll feel for each other, and if we have a future together. After I officially forgive you, of course. But I will still love you, dear," exclaimed Isabella. "You are the only man I will ever love." "You don't know that, Isabella," Tom said sadly. "None of us knows what we will feel." With these words, he stood up, took his coat, and headed towards the door. "Where are you going, darling?" exclaimed Isabella. "Behind the children, Isabella," Tom replied. "I will leave them until late in the evening. You will have the opportunity to call if you wish." Isabella simply leaned back on the chair with a vacant look, but Claire jumped up and grabbed Tom's hand as he was leaving the house. "You're either a heartless idiot or a damn genius, Tom," she blurted out. "Probably both," he weakly smiled. "I hope everything works out for you." Claire wrinkled her nose. "I understand what you're planning, trying to scare her with the consequences, but I don't know if it will work." "Well, I just hope, Claire, that it will work out," Tom grimly replied. "All I can do is hope." Isabella and Tom continued living their lives, trying to pretend that nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and sometimes the atmosphere became suffocating. At least they weren't snapping at each other, but the lack of conversation between them was almost as bad as an open quarrel. On Thursday evening, while pretending to chop vegetables, Isabella announced, "I'm going somewhere tomorrow evening." "Great," Have fun, Tom replied, not lifting his eyes. Aren't you interested in where I'm going? Demanded Isabella. Not really, Tom replied, finally looking at her. Unless it's something I need to know about. Isabella silently left the room. Tom realized that his plan had failed. On Friday evening, when Tom returned home, dinner was ready, and an open bottle of wine stood on the table. Like the Last Supper of a condemned man, he thought. Isabella descended the stairs. It must be said, she looked beautiful. Hello, dear. Have you seen the wine I left out? It'll do, grumbled Tom, turning away. Then I will go, Isabella said quietly. I will be back by midnight. Are you sure you want to do this? Tom asked in a final attempt to dissuade her. I have to, my dear, Isabella whispered. But don't worry, I'm not planning to go too far. I just want to understand how comfortable I am dating another man. And should that reassure me? Tom snapped. Isabella leaned in to kiss him goodbye, but Tom turned away. Save your kisses for your lover. Isabella looked at him in surprise and silently headed towards the door. Enjoy yourself, sarcastically shouted Tom after her. Alone now, Tom pondered where he had gone wrong. He knew he would forgive her formally, but deep down he wouldn't be able to. What awaited them? A quick divorce or a slow descent into family hell? He didn't know, but he was sure he would track down this Dave and make him pay. And what to do with Isabella? Probably nothing. He would just not be there one day, even though he still loved her. And the children? How could life be so cruel? Tom sat there, as if in a daze, forgetting where he was. The sound of the front door closing brought him out of his reverie. He assumed Isabella had finally gone out on a date. But suddenly the door to the living room opened, and he saw Isabella with tears in her eyes. You did promise to forgive me, Tom? Isabella sobbed. I did, Tom cautiously replied, puzzled why she hadn't left yet. Then forgive me for being so foolish, insensitive, and heartless, please, Tom, Isabella pleaded. Tom hesitated. I think I could. I couldn't do it, Tom, Isabella blurted out. I opened the front door and physically couldn't step over the threshold. It suddenly dawned on me what I was about to do to our marriage and to you, my dear. I don't want to be with another man, Tom, and I can't believe what a fool I've been. All I want is for you to love me. You still love me, don't you, Tom? More than ever, Tom breathed out, jumping to his feet and enfolding her in his arms. More than ever, my dear. And do you forgive me, dear? Isabella asked. Completely, my dear, Tom replied. I told you that night before our wedding that I would love and adore you forever, and I meant it. And do you remember what else you promised me that night, my love? Isabella hoarsely whispered in his ear. That I would be so good in bed that you would never be tempted? Tom recalled. I remember, Isabella. Why don't you take me upstairs right now and keep that promise, she continued. And I promise you, I will never mention that other promise again. Tom smiled, took her hand, and led her to the stairs. Isabella and Tom were about to start the first day of the rest of their lives, and everything was good again in the Thompsons' house. Thank you, God, thought Tom. Oh, I forgot. I wasn't supposed to believe in him, right? If you're over 18, don't miss the upcoming story and remember to click the like button to show your support. Thank you.